So recently I quiet quit my corporate job. I was working in investment banking and I'd been doing it for several years, and I was considering whether I want to do it over the long term, what are my long-term life goals, and eventually I did quiet quit that job. Now, what is quiet quitting? Quiet quitting essentially involves you're working a corporate job. You might be a bit disillusioned with it. You're not drinking the corporate Kool-Aid. You're thinking about perhaps alternative lifestyle choices, maybe living abroad, having your own business, working an easier job and enjoying your life more than the work. And in that case, you'd essentially be working your current job and just kind of minimize your work output until you kind of, are part of a layoff and they let you go and pay you some kind of layoff payment before you leave the company. Or you're perhaps looking at, just doing less work and seeing how long you can get away with it until maybe they flag it to you. So it's all about prioritizing your life, your health, your mental, physical health, and your financial health in a sense, and minimizing the work output you're giving to these major corporations. Now, I myself have worked at Goldman Sachs, HSBC, and studied at London School of Economics. There's a few screenshots there and a few logos there to give you a bit of my background. In this video, I'm going to give an example of myself who has quite quit investment banking and my experience working in sales and trading. And I thought what would be interesting is to consider my experience juxtaposed or compared to the experience of a tech worker. She works in tech sales and she did quiet quitting too. So let's talk about, my experience and how it might help you.
From the ground, which is of course where any good crisis first takes root. So I was myopically happy in my career for at least a few years, like the first 3 years. I say myopically because I didn't allow myself to challenge the feelings of discontentment or dissonance that did bubble up in the first stages of my career. I would only allow myself to accept feelings that allowed me to just pedal forward, which makes sense, right? That's self-preservation.
So what she's saying here at the start is something I experienced while working on the trading floor of some of these major investment banks. You'll essentially be working there. You might not be too happy. You might think something doesn't feel quite right. Maybe I'm not quite fitting in here. Or maybe this isn't something I want to do over the long term. Maybe you can't trust your co-workers. There's a lot of gossiping and backstabbing and underhanded tactics. And maybe you can't see all of them, but you can sense something doesn't seem quite right. And what you'd essentially be doing is you trying to manage that or ignore that and think, if I do the right thing and work hard, it'll pay off. If I just try to be nice to people, maybe things will progress. But you're getting a bit more disillusioned, but you keep ignoring that fact. And that's really the start of the quiet quitting process. You're reaching a point where you kind of can't ignore that you're not maybe happy at your job. Maybe your co-workers are a bit conniving and you don't really want to deal with them for the longer term. So that's the start of the quiet quitting experience. And what's interesting is I'm working in finance, she's working in tech. Technically, we should have completely different experiences in the work environment, but there is some similarity there. And I'm sure some of you watching have also had that experience.
My first inclination to quit didn't really come until 2 years ago, conveniently the summer of 2020 when many crises were afoot. But starting in January of that year, I was traveling every week for work in a role that wasn't meant to be traveling. It was supposed to be more of a desk job that supported the salespeople that would travel. So what that meant for me is that I was out on the road 3 to 4 days a week, which was the highlight of the job for me, and not having that component of the job definitely impacted my satisfaction during the early pandemic. But anywho, I would be gone 3 to 4 days a week and come back to my desk and needing to do what was then 5 days of work in 1 to 2 days at my actual computer.
So this is another trigger point for quiet quitting, is you essentially getting dumped with lots and lots of work. It could be the work from you having to balance kind of two roles. In this case, she was traveling to meet clients, but she also had to be at the desk and deal with other clients through emails and things like that. She was essentially doing two jobs at once. And something that is quite similar in a lot of office environments, or in my case, in the finance environment on trading floors, is someone will leave, someone will be off sick, someone will go on maternity leave, someone will restructure the team, and then all of a sudden you're doing your job plus half of someone else's job. In my case, I was working at a major American investment bank and my manager was frequently off sick. and my team member, she was out on maternity leave. She came back and she was kind of working part-time. So I effectively had to do three people's role as one person. And, the management wouldn't hire someone extra, like a contract worker, to help out. So I'm kind of balancing three jobs, which ended up resulting in me getting stressed out, burnt out, and dealing with like impacts to my physical or mental health. And it was really too much. And I kind of reached a point where I thought, what's the point here, right? I wasn't getting paid significant amounts, even though it was the finance industry. I know where I was given my years of experience and how much I should be getting paid. So I was getting quite frustrated with it, but at the time it was a major, big investment bank. And you think, okay, let me maintain healthy relations here. This could lead to future opportunities. And this is something you're always fooled with in the corporate environment. Oh, you're going to get promoted next year or in a couple of years if you keep balancing three jobs as one person. In her case, kind of doing two people's jobs. You can leverage this into higher pay at another company and things like that. And sometimes it doesn't work out that way. That's not really how it works out. You're just being given corporate Kool-Aid to drink in a sense. So that's something worthwhile considering. Like, if you are in that type of position and you're getting fed up of a job, you're maybe doing two people's job at the same time, you should think whether you want to quiet quit and see how long you can go if you do reduce your effort levels. Now, what this leads to is that you're kind of got this $1 billion company you're working for, $100 million company, major corporations, and it's kind of, they're making billions of dollars on profit, $100 million of profit, however much. Your managers are getting paid 3-5 times your salary, and you're effectively bearing the load of that. You're not a stockholder or a shareholder. Maybe you got some shares or stocks, but nothing major. You're not reaping the benefits of your hard work. You're getting taxed. Typically now tax is very high across the West, even in American states, 35-40% tax. There's no real reward for that extra hard work. You feel like you're drowning in that extra work, and then a moment hits and you snap your fingers and you think, okay, well, I'm going to try quiet quitting. Let me see if I do less work, what's going to happen? Because I've seen many different scenarios where, well, some people, they do less work and they still get rewarded and promoted and they're one of the manager's favorites. And other people, if they're not the manager's favorites, they do less work and then it really does impact them. They do get, bad performance reviews and they do get put on performance improvement plans, PIPs or performance development plans, and then they're cut from the company. So it really is a mixed bag. That's why you should always look out for your best interests, right? And it's important to have boundaries between like that workplace environment and, your personal life. So, arriving on time, leaving on time, all these things are important. Doing anything extra, it rarely ever pays off. And the other thing is, she mentions it briefly, is that the nature of work has become incredibly political. So I don't just mean office politics of people sucking up to management or, gossiping and backstabbing and things like that. I mean political in the sense that you go to work and they're pushing political ideology on you, woke culture, liberalism, feminism, the rainbow community stuff, racial propaganda, race baiting propaganda. And you just go to work. You've got enough stresses to deal with in their life, whether it's managing your finances in this inflationary environment, raising your kids when the schools are trying to brainwash them, keeping your family safe when the country can't maintain its borders. So all these type of things you're dealing with, and then you've got to go to work and they try to dump some extra pressure on your head saying you're a bad person if you're a man or if you're a particular race or if you have particular views that don't agree with some radical left-wing worldview. So all these type of things, they do weigh on you until the point someone can have a mental breakdown. Or they just quiet quit and say, I'm fed up of working here. I wouldn't say scam the company, but I would just say minimize their effort and make as much money from this $1 billion corporation that treats you like a second-class citizen until you're basically laid off,
With the amount of work I was taking on at that stage of my career, that was not possible for me. And I was never able to play catch up on what I was behind on, which just exasperated me. Like, I started working later and later, and then March hit, we went into lockdown.
Yeah, so as you can see, maintaining those boundaries is important, and kind of doing your best in that type of scenario is quite interesting. And what I want to do right now is skip ahead, and we're going to get a bit of a definition of quiet quitting, because I know it can be a bit confusing. What does it actually mean and how is it actually managed?
Job of explaining it.
Quiet quitting is you come to work maybe like a minute before you got to clock in. You do just enough to not get in trouble. You leave at exactly 5 o'clock, and you basically do just enough to get by and not get fired. Basically, it's like your body is physically at the job, You're physically coming, clocking in and doing your job, but you're mentally checked out.
I didn't even realize.
So that's a good summary there, right? And I think a lot of people are in that situation right now. And that's why you probably might be relating to this video, because you're working your corporate job or any job, maybe it's a retail job. That guy has an interesting channel. His name's Timothy Ward. He worked in office environments. He was getting kind of fed up with it. So he does seasonal work. He works as a park ranger for some of the national parks in America. He does, I think, some other side work he does on the side to have alternative income sources, so he's not dependent on one income source. So those kind of things are kind of important to consider in terms of alternative lifestyle choices, but also that pressure he was talking about, the pressure that's on your head and on my head when you're trying to work hard and it's not really paying off. So what you do is you just put less effort in each day and you try to make it as not noticeable as possible and see what happens. Because you need to I feel like, this system has really pushed people a bit too far in the last few years, given, events of 2020 onwards. And people are kind of mentally checked out. You might be mentally checked out of the news. You might be mentally checked out of socializing. You might be mentally checked out of work, right, in this case. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Like, the news is lying to you about a lot of things we can't even discuss on this platform. Social dynamics between men and women, between different races, the social contract is kind of broken, to be honest, between the people and the government, and in this case, between the employer and the employee, the company and the worker. So in that case, if you mentally check out and you're just like, okay, I got to go to work, respond to 10 emails this morning, go for a coffee, sit at my desk, check the news, check my phone, respond to a few more emails, go to a few meetings, talk for about 5 minutes, 1 hour pointless meeting, and then get back on with my life. And I think a lot of people are living their life like that right now, which I can't really blame them for, even though I was someone who would like be working quite hard, trying to impress the manager, things like, not even impress the manager. I took pride in my work. And I think a lot of you probably watching this, you do take pride in your work. You're not trying to be lazy, but you realize taking pride in your work, working hard, doing a good job, it doesn't pay off. So you gotta be, I wouldn't say, like I say, be a scam artist. You gotta maneuver and strategize effectively your energy, because you only have limited energy each day to dedicate to your workouts, going to the gym in the morning or the evening, to get ready for work, meal prep your meals, do the work you need to do, deal with the office politics, deal with the gossiping, deal with the fact that you're in a very unnatural environment in the office where you're surrounded by people, you have different agendas, they might be trying to fool you one way or the other, manipulate you one way or the other way to take on their work instead of doing your work. It's really a social game rather than like doing the work, and that's what can put people under too much pressure. So let's continue with this and see what else she has to say. In this, she's going through like an example of a news article where someone has actually gone through quiet quitting and what the emotional impact is. It's quite interesting because we go through this type of phase where you become disillusioned, you put in less effort, you realize no one's even noticing that when you're putting in more effort, and they're not noticing when you're putting in less effort, at least for a long time, until they might lay you off a year or two later. So it really makes you think, you feel like your work is kind of pointless and it's not valued and you're not getting paid enough, particularly given this inflationary environment, and you end up kind of, going the other way. So let's listen to a bit of this interesting story.
Justin pushed the boundaries ever so slightly, logging on half an hour later, logging off half an hour earlier, taking long lunches, running errands in the middle of the day. He struggled as he tried to shed his old work ethic, admonishing himself as lazy, wondering whether he was a burned-out failure. His colleagues asked why he was no longer returning their late-night emails until the next morning. For a guy who had always gone above and beyond, it was uncomfortable doing the bare minimum. I was sweating bullets, but I was like, look, they're not going to fire me, he said. It would take them months to find someone new and train them up. My lessened productivity is better than zero productivity.
So that's an interesting story there, and you can feel free to pause the video and have a detailed read yourself. So this is what you realize. Cool. Working hard, not paying off. Putting in less effort, no one really notices it, and this guy clearly didn't have the boundaries. He was drinking the corporate Kool-Aid, which I have, which many of you have. You extra work in the evening, extra work in the morning, arriving early, leaving late, and you think, you're super invested in corporate company's message. But that corporate Kool-Aid isn't really selling anymore, right? Even people working for big name corporations like Google and Goldman Sachs, things like that, They've seen some of the scandals they've got caught up with. They've seen the impact of DEI and how unfairly men are treated, or Asians in some instances. And they're like, well, none of this is making sense. This isn't really a company whose values I agree with. You're not really treating employees fairly, and you kind of treat them like you can hire and fire them whenever you want. Well, if you're not loyal to me, then I'm not going to be loyal to you. And that's an important message here, that this guy, through the process of quiet quitting, for example, when I was leaving that major American investment bank, I realized, okay, cool, well, I'm a bit disillusioned here, and I didn't say that, of course, but out loud there. But I was kind of like, okay, let me realize my worth. What is my worth as an individual? Not my worth as a director of this company, my role as vice president or director or executive director for a particular company. What is my worth as whatever social status or even income that is associated with a particular corporate role. It was more like, who am I, like, in a sense, economics Ethan, who am I as myself, rather than who am I as an employee, as a worker. And that's really an important thing to consider. This woman kind of goes off on some tangents in her video about socialism and anti-capitalism and things I don't necessarily agree with. But there is something to be said about valuing who you are and not who the company wants to exploit you as, in a sense.
Find someone new and train them.
So let's skip ahead in this video and see what she has to say on delaying quiet quitting, because that's quite an interesting perspective.
Sometimes a yucky feeling is
Where? I wasn't ready to quite pinpoint when, though. I let the timeline to quit and slip in favor of the conservative choice, which is just to let life happen to you. At first, I was like, okay, I'm going to quit at the end of the year. That's the most natural time. After the fourth quarter is over, I will exit stage left. That came and went because I got put on a new team with new coworkers and a new manager. And I was like, oh, wait, I'll just stay for this.
So what's interesting about quiet quitting, and I dealt with the similar consequences, right, where you end up putting in less effort and surprisingly people don't notice. So firstly, if you're out there, and even if you're quiet quitting or not quiet quitting, see what happens if you put in 20% less effort. Is anyone going to notice? And I think a lot of the cases it's no, because so much of the corporate world, we have very inefficient, bloated companies. If you're doing a bit less or a bit slower work, I wouldn't even say a bit less, but maybe a bit slower, maybe elongating your work timeline by 50%, no one's going to notice. They're just going to be like, oh, we've got a lot of work to do, so it's taking a bit longer than normal. No one's really going to hold that against you. And then when it comes in terms of delaying quiet quitting, at the end of the day, what is quiet quitting? It's putting in less effort until you do get, like I say, get laid off, or you find another job, or you go on a work break and you don't want to work for a few months or a year. What she's essentially laying out here is that if your goal is to make as much money from this company before you're shown the door, and they make some changes, you have a slightly different role now because they've restructured the team, you're doing slightly different work, I would say just stay at the company. If you're going to continue getting paid for doing very little work, might as well just stay there and get paid as much as you can until they tell you to leave. So that's something to consider.
And then I was like, okay, the circumstances have changed slightly, but I know what I need to do. I need to quit. Then, miraculously, like I talked about in the last section, I got a raise. And I was like, oh, how could I leave now? Only an idiot would leave after they got a raise. That would be so stupid, right? So I stayed.
So what's interesting here, and to echo what's kind of similar in my experience, is there'll be so many changes in the corporate office that you're not in control of, right? My manager was changing. My manager changed like 4 times in 4 years because no one liked the management above them. So people kept coming in, doing the job for a year and getting out because they got fed up with the manager above them. I had team members who were, like I say, out on maternity leave, out on sick leave, getting apparently long illnesses which were unidentifiable, and they'll come into work some days, not the other days, leave the company, then they'll hire contract workers, then they'll restructure the work and who's doing what work on our team, have brand new people come in who really don't know what they're doing, and you have to kind of pick the slack up for them. The most frustrating thing about the workplace environment in most offices is so many things you are out of your control. And you're like, okay, cool, I'm trying to do my best, trying to work hard here, trying to work efficiently, working at a big name company. You think you're going to be around super hyper efficient people. And that's not the case. You're dealing with a lot of, like I say, slimy, greasy characters, backstabbing, gossiping. incompetent people put in senior roles, put in roles at your level, and they're just sucking up to the right people. They don't know what they're doing. They're talking a lot of rubbish. They're just a type of person who will talk a lot in a meeting and not say much, and they'll be looked upon positively because they're playing into the kind of corporate character you've got to play in the environment and being fake. And that's what you got to do. If you're quiet quitting, just go with the flow. Whatever's going on, oh, they're going to change your work. They're going to say, okay, cool, well, not because you're quiet quitting, just because changes are happening at the company. Or we need you to spend more time on emerging. We need you to spend more time on bond trading and less time on FX trading, foreign exchange trading. Okay, cool, I'll do that. That was one of my phrases, for example. Okay, sure, yeah, cool, I'll do that. Just be like completely emotionally detached. Oh, we need you to go to this meeting on bond trading and avoid that meeting on loan trading. Sure, I'll go there, cool. People, and that's the funny thing is they I don't know what it is in the corporate environment. They want you to always be this super enthusiastic character. If you're just kind of emotionally monotone, whether you're quiet quitting or not, they think it's some kind of threat, like a front. Oh, you need to be. Oh yeah, I'd love to go to a bond trading meeting instead of a loan trading meeting. No, I'm not like that emotional. I just get on with the work so I can get paid and live my life. So that's what you got to kind of consider. You're quiet quitting. You're just there to make as much money as you can till it's time to go. So if they change your role or whatever, just go with the flow, collect the paycheck, collect the bonuses, particularly in this inflationary environment. Make as much money as you can for doing as little work as you can.
Paid. Because I was like, this would just be humiliating to leave after I got a raise. And then I was like, okay, my sabbatical's coming up. Company paid sabbatical. That's such a privilege and a luxury. I should stay for that. So that means I need to stay until September. But then the end of the year is just 3 months later. The logic and the math were mathing, but I knew if I just kept following that same trajectory, I would literally never quit. There's always going to be something, and that is the realization I came to. So despite the raise, despite the new team, despite the sabbatical I would be giving up, I made the decision in the spring to quit.
So she finally made the decision to quit. Now, in my case, without naming the company, because there's all these legal agreements you got to sign, she made the decision to quit before they kind of laid her off, which could have happened a year or two down the line, which makes you think, how much does a company really able to monitor your productivity if you just do the bare basics? If you just attend meetings and speak up about whatever topic, you do a little bit of work, respond to a couple emails. If you do that each day, who's going to notice if you're not putting in much effort or not? Maybe if you play an over-enthusiastic character, even though if you're not doing much work, that might also work and help pay off. So there's an important lesson to learn here in the sense that she kind of was looking for another job, and she eventually did find one that more suits her lifestyle choices and her personal values. And in my case, what happened was things went on for some time. There ended up being some kind of mass layoffs in the company, and I ended up getting some kind of voluntary redundancy, like a voluntary layoff. You get paid. They say, okay, sign this agreement to leave the company and we'll pay you X amount, right? And don't pursue any legal action against us, essentially. And that's kind of what happened in the end. And what we had was a scenario, I can't get into too many of the details, but there were certain things, certain business practices, hiring, promotion practices and things like that, which you might have heard me be critical of in other videos, that I did flag to them, and certain medical procedures that they were trying to force on employees, such as myself, that we weren't comfortable with that. And then I flagged some of these things. They weren't comfortable that, if you speak up as an employee, they're not really too comfortable with that. If you stand up for yourself, and then they try to pretend it's a performance issue when it's really not. So in the end, I kind of, saw the writing on the wall, saw they kind of wanted me to leave. I wanted to leave. I didn't like the management there. There was completely hypocritical, and then I got laid off essentially. And the thing is, if you are dealing with a layoff after quiet quitting, firstly, you shouldn't be upset because that's kind of the goal. You're looking to put in less effort and get paid more until you can leave the company, number one. Number two, in terms of the layoff, you'll get a payment, so you'll be able to use that for your living costs or investments or whatever until you find a new job. And then the other thing is that what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to, plan ahead. So if you're looking for another job, you can look for another job. If you're building your side business while quiet quitting, you're putting your effort and energy into your side business instead of doing the corporate job, then you can go ahead and do that. So there's many different alternative solutions there, right? It's not just simply quiet quit and do nothing. It's quiet quit and plan for your future. In this case, she extended the quiet quitting time period for several months because she's working these different roles, collecting a bonus. In my case, I was kind of putting in less effort to see what would happen. They said they'd put me on a performance improvement plan and things like that. And then they said they wouldn't because I can work extremely hard and have extremely high quality work. But then once you work for a company, you understand how much are you going to get paid if you put in A+ work or A- work. How much you're going to get paid if you put in a B+ effort rather than a C effort, right? So I realized, okay, putting B+ effort is what's going to pay off, and doing anything more than B+ is going to lead to me getting burnt out and not getting paid anymore. So I thought, okay, you want me to be a B+ player like Daniel Bryan, if you keep up with WWE, I'll be a B+ player because you're not going to pay me to be an A+ player. I'll be a B+ player. And then they couldn't really put me on a performance improvement plan because it didn't make sense, because you can't really say some work. I evidence everything I'm doing, and this is what you should do during quiet quitting or in general, is make sure you evidence everything you're doing so they can't like use your less effort against you, because you'll say, well, okay, I'm doing this work in this amount of time, that other co-worker's doing that work in like double the time, or they're getting weeks of extensions. Can you explain that? Because that's not fair employee treatment. And when you put things like that, like employee treatment or hostile work environment or fair treatment of employees, fair performance reviews, things like that, they'll trigger words. They know that could lead to litigation. Like if you start putting stuff like that in writing, if you start asking for confirmation of what the work task is in writing and summarizing what you've been told in writing, then they know, okay, you're clearly defending yourself when you could be up for some kind of layoff or employee mistreatment type of situation. So make sure you kind of navigate that carefully by covering your tracks and looking out for yourself, because the company, if they're gunning for you and they want to get rid of you, you can't let them exploit you.
Patrons know where that's from. Ultimately, there's nothing radical about quitting your job without another one backed up. I'm not pretending that I am a revolutionary. The more based thing to do is to organize your workplace and form a union, so
essentially what she did is she quit her job and she didn't have another job lined up. Now, my advice to you is, if you're quitting your job and you don't have another job lined up, don't do that. You should have another job lined up, another income source lined up, maybe your side business, maybe you've saved up enough money or invested enough money to survive for a couple years without getting another job. Maybe you're going to live abroad in a lower cost location. Many people, particularly in somewhere like London where I live, or in New York and places like that, where you're from a more diverse background, and you can maybe go back to your home country or country of origin, your ancestral country, like in Asia or Africa, and you can go and maybe live a low cost life for a couple years before you come back to the work environment and find your next job when the economy recovers, or in that time focus on your own business or maybe different lifestyle choices you're pursuing. So it's worthwhile considering that type of scenario.
And then just losing myself in the process.
So finally, what now? What's the plan? Well, I am going to be taking a self-funded sabbatical. It is going to be primarily a break for my own well-being, which means that I am not going to try to spin YouTube into a full-time self-employed job.
So this is her plan. She's mentioning taking some time away from the workplace environment. And if you're watching this, I'd recommend that to you. If you've gone through a quiet quitting process, or you're going to go through it, you'll reach the end of that and you'll have some kind of, it's like taking the red pill, or seeing through the matrix, however you want to describe it. You should go, hold on, I've been working hard for so many years, it hasn't really paid off. I put in less effort, it goes unnoticed for many months or many years. Have you been kidding yourself that hard work does pay off, or that your employee does value, your company does value you? Have you been completely under the illusion of the corporate Kool-Aid all this time? So that's what will happen. And what will typically happen, what happened for me and for her, clearly, you take some time away from the work environment, whether it's a couple months, half a year or so on, and you go, hold on, okay, let me reassess this. Now, next time I go to work for a company, I'm not going to burn myself out. I'm going to figure out what effort level is required to stay employed, because nowadays it's more about staying employed and getting decent pay or a decent bonus, rather than aiming to be an A+ player and get slightly more pay or slightly more bonus that is not really that impactful and life-changing compared to the effort you're putting in. If you're putting in 50% more effort and you're getting paid 5% more, it just doesn't make sense to do that. You might as well put in less effort and look out for your health. in that scenario, you take a bit of a break of the work environment. You understand the workplace dynamics next time you get another job. You maybe reconsider the lifestyle decisions you're making. Now, I kept up with her, a few of other videos I've seen. I think she's pursued a more, maybe a lower paying, less stressful job, working for like charities and NGOs and things like that. And she lives, I think, a more lower cost lifestyle rather than in an expensive city. So that might be an answer for you. I know many people during the pandemic, they moved from major cities like London and New York to maybe more rural countryside type of areas. And they don't leave that. I've seen a case where someone was working in London, dealt a similar quiet quitting scenario, to be honest, and they moved to Yorkshire, which is like moving from New York to the kind of Wyoming type of place in America, moving to a more country area, and they enjoyed it there. And then they found a remote job. They've got different lifestyle plans and investment plans. So that's what you should consider. Maximizing your freedom rather than maximizing your career growth is all about what quiet quitting's about. If you have any questions, leave a comment below. I'll help you and advise you a bit more on how quiet quitting worked for me. And also, just to finish up here, I offer 3 different kind of solutions here, right? The first is a free ebook about 10 career lessons from working in the banking industry. This will help anyone who's working a corporate career. The other thing is I offer a free discovery call, which is where you can discuss anything you're dealing with, maybe your career goals, your finance queries, and savings and investments. I also went to top universities, so I can help with university questions or learning, improving your financial literacy, or how to navigate, the next step in your career. So all types of these type of things I do to help my clients with. And that's also free. And the last thing is I have a wait list for my control program, which is where you can take control of dealing with these very difficult life-changing questions, like taking control of your career fulfillment, finding a career that actually works for you and that you actually enjoy, even though it is a job is at the end of the day, but something that you do kind of work well with. And then also consider your time freedom. We can look at strategies to help you find remote jobs, hybrid work where you're spending some time in the office, some time at home, part-time contract work, all those type of things. And then also we look at your financial literacy, your financial investments, saving, budgeting, and investing to help you essentially build up a nest egg, build up a significant amount of money to help you be rich forever and live life on your terms, whether that's living abroad, living in, as I say, off the grid, things like that. And then also, essentially, what we want to do here is, work is life. We want you to work to live, not live to work, right? So I'll help you through strategies to help you live the life you love, whatever that is, whether it's you want to have a remote job, living off the grid, homeschooling your kids. I'll help you with that kind of plan and push forward to that. Because we're all dealing with very difficult circumstances right now. There's many people who, even though they're trying to distract themselves, using their phone, using their Netflix and whatever other distraction, they're avoiding the fact that, buying a house is unaffordable, having kids is unaffordable. There's lots of gender dynamics why people wouldn't be in relationships or get married. Climbing the corporate ladder is difficult because the people above you are never retiring because they're kind of working forever, these boomers and 40, 50, 60-year-old people taking up the senior roles. So you need to kind of rethink your life and how you're going to structure it. And that's what I'm kind of here to help you do in terms of, your workplace, your finances, your long-term career goals. So feel free to check out any of those links in the description below. You have 2 recommended videos on your screen right now, a free ebook in the description, and I'll see you next time.